Part 1. On the highest level of Unity Spire, a space station that hung like a silver jewel above the blue-green curve of a distant planet, the air hummed with quiet tension. Delegates from over 200 star systems gathered there every cycle to speak, argue, and sometimes agree. The Galactic Council was not a place of war, but it was also not a place of trust. Every species that walked its polished halls came with guards, tall, armored, and armed to the teeth. Some carried plasma rifles that could melt steel. Others wore wrist-mounted sonic blasters or carried gravity whips that could knock a man flat without touching him. Weapons were normal, expected, a sign of seriousness, but the humans were different. When Ambassador Daniel Porter stepped off the Earth shuttle, he was flanked by 4 men and women in plain black uniforms. No armor, no helmets, and no weapons. Not even a knife at their belts. Their hands hung loose at their sides. Their eyes moved slowly, calmly, taking in everything without panic. They walked like people who had nothing to fear and nothing to prove. A few delegates paused to stare. Others whispered behind raised hands. Counselor Vex of the Qatari Dominion, a tall reptilian figure with silver scales and slitted eyes, let out a dry hiss of amusement. "Look," he said to his aide, "the humans send children to guard their diplomat." His voice carried just enough to be heard by nearby ears. Daniel Porter did not react. He simply nodded to his guards and kept walking toward the main chamber. The lead guard, a man named Kyle Briggs, glanced once at Vex but said nothing. His face showed no anger, no offense, only quiet attention. Inside the council chamber, the air was cooler, scented with calming pheromones used by the insectoid Mirkal to keep tempers low. Seats rose in wide arcs around a central speaking platform. Each delegation had its own section, marked by glowing symbols. The human section was small. Earth had only been part of the council for 12 cycles, but it was always full. Not because humans were powerful, but because they were strange. During the session, the topic was trade routes near the Helios Rift. The Zorvathi delegation argued loudly that their ships had been harassed by unknown raiders. The Selenari Conquered denied any involvement. Voices rose. Fists slammed on consoles. A Qatari guard stepped forward, hand resting on the hilt of his energy blade. That was when everyone noticed the humans again. While other guards shifted nervously or gripped their weapons tighter, the human guard stood perfectly still. Lena Cruz, a woman with dark eyes and short black hair, watched the Zorvathi speaker without blinking. Marcus Boyd, broad-shouldered and calm, stood with his weight evenly balanced on both feet. Theo Grant, the youngest of the group, kept his hands clasped behind his back as if he were at a school assembly. Ambassador Porter finally stood to speak. "The Earth delegation suggests a joint patrol," he said, his voice even. "Not armed ships, observers, neutral parties. We've found that when you send warriors, you get war. When you send watchers, you get truth." A few delegates scoffed. Vex leaned back in his seat. "And who will protect these watchers if bullets start flying?" he asked, voice dripping with mockery. Porter smiled slightly. "We will." Vex's eyes flicked to the human guards. "With what? Kind words?" Porter didn't answer. He simply sat down. The meeting moved on, but the question lingered in the air like smoke. Later, in the quiet corridor outside the human quarters, Kyle Briggs stood alone, looking out a wide viewport at the stars. He wasn't on duty, but he rarely relaxed. A Mirkal delegate, small and many-limbed, scuttled up beside him. "You do not carry weapons," the alien said in halting standard. "Why?" Briggs turned slowly. "Because we don't need them." The Mirkal tilted its head. "All beings need weapons. Even plants have thorns." "Not all thorns are sharp," Briggs replied. "Sometimes just knowing they're there is enough." The alien blinked its compound eyes, then scurried away, clearly puzzled. Back on Earth, centuries ago, people had learned a hard lesson. Wars could be won with guns, but peace could only be held with discipline. The best fighters weren't the ones with the biggest weapons. They were the ones who knew when not to use them. Human diplomatic guards weren't chosen for their strength or speed. They were chosen for their control, their patience, their ability to read a room, a face, a flicker of muscle before violence even began. They trained for years, not just in combat, but in silence, in stillness, in the art of standing so calmly that others felt uneasy. Their greatest weapon was the question they made enemies ask themselves. If they're not afraid, what do they know that I don't? On Unity Spire, rumors began to spread. Some said the humans used hidden tech, nanobots in their blood, neural implants that let them move faster than sight. Others claimed they were bioengineered soldiers bred for restraint. But no scans showed enhancements. No records showed secret programs. They were just people, ordinary in every measurable way except for how they moved, how they watched, how they never flinched. One evening, a young Qatari page tasked with delivering messages passed the human guards stationed outside Porter's suite. He slowed, curious. Up close, they didn't look dangerous. Just tired, human. Why do you stand like that? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Lena Cruz looked down at him. Like what? Like you're waiting for something that never comes. She almost smiled. We're not waiting, she said. We're ready. The boy didn't understand, but he remembered those words. Days passed. Tensions rose over resource rights in the Outer Rim. A minor skirmish broke out between Zorvathi and Selenari freighters. The council grew louder, angrier. More guards appeared in the halls, weapons visible, fingers near triggers. But the humans remained unchanged. No extra guards. No hidden armor. Just the same four standing in the same places, calm as stone. Then came the day of the Viridia Station Summit, a neutral meeting place far from Unity Spire. The humans would attend. And their guards would go with them. Unarmed as always. No one knew it yet, but everything was about to change. Because on Viridia, the Zorvathi radicals would make their move. And the galaxy would finally see what happened when someone mistook calm for weakness. But that was still ahead. For now, on Unity Spire, the humans walked without weapons, spoke without shouting, and stood without fear. And the rest of the galaxy watched, confused, curious, and just a little afraid of what they didn't understand. Part 2. Viridia Station hung in the quiet dark between two star systems, a neutral meeting place shaped like a wide silver ring spinning slowly against the stars. Inside, delegates from a dozen worlds gathered to discuss mining rights in the Helios Belt. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and faint spices from the food halls. Security was tight. Armed guards from every delegation stood at every entrance, scanning faces, checking credentials, fingers never far from triggers. The humans arrived last. Ambassador Daniel Porter stepped off the shuttle with his usual calm, followed by Kyle Briggs, Lena Cruz, Marcus Boyd, and Theo Grant. As always, they carried no weapons. Some delegates shook their heads. Others rolled their eyes. A Zorvathi officer muttered something about soft skins playing diplomat. The summit began in the central chamber, a wide dome with soft lighting and floating translation orbs. Talk started well enough, but halfway through the second session, everything changed. Without warning, 6 Zorvathi warriors in black tactical armor burst through the eastern doors. They moved fast, shouting in their guttural tongue. Pulse blades flared to life in their hands, blue-white energy humming like angry wasps. 2 station security officers tried to stop them. One was thrown against a wall. The other was disarmed and knocked unconscious with a single strike. Panic erupted. Delegates scrambled for exits. Chairs overturned. A Myrical envoy dropped to the floor, limbs trembling. The Zorvathi radicals, members of a splinter group that rejected the council's authority, had come not to talk, but to take control. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Kor, stood on the main platform, blade raised. Nobody leaves, he growled in rough standard. This station is ours until the council agrees to our terms. Hostages were gathered near the center. Guards from other delegations were forced to drop their weapons under threat of death. The Zorvathi knew the rules. Harm a diplomat and war follows. But they also knew fear worked faster than treaties. Then the humans walked in. They hadn't been in the chamber during the attack. They'd been in a side room reviewing trade data. Now they stood at the main entrance, calm, watching. Porter stepped forward slightly, hands open. Kor, he said, voice steady. This isn't the way, Kor sneered. Earthman, you bring no guns, no armor. You think your words will stop us? He gestured to his warriors. Take them. Bind them with the others. 2 Zorvathi moved toward the humans, blades low but ready. They expected surrender. What they got was silence and speed. Kyle Briggs didn't shout. He didn't charge. He simply stepped left, just as the first warrior swung. His hand caught the alien's wrist mid-motion, twisted it up and back. There was a sharp crack, bone not blade, and the Zorvathi dropped with a cry. Before the second could react, Lena Cruz was already inside his guard. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, then swept his legs. He hit the floor hard, breath gone. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of pulse blades. Kor's eyes widened. "Kill them," he snapped. 3 warriors lunged at once. What happened next was over before most could blink. Marcus Boyd met the first with a shoulder strike that folded the alien in half. Theo Grant sidestepped a wild slash, grabbed the warrior's arm and used his own momentum to flip him over a nearby console. The Zorvathi crashed into a data terminal, stunned. Briggs moved like water. He ducked under a blade, closed the distance, and pressed 2 fingers just below the warrior's jaw. The alien gasped, eyes rolled back, and collapsed. It wasn't magic. It wasn't tech. It was pressure on a nerve cluster. Precise, practiced, painless. Lena faced the last attacker. He swung high. She dropped low, swept his feet, then pinned his wrist with her knee. With one hand, she yanked the cord from his own utility belt and looped it around his arms. He struggled for only a second before going still, shocked more than hurt. 12 seconds. That was all it took. 7 Zorvathi warriors lay on the floor, bound with their own gear, breathing but unconscious or subdued. Not one human had thrown a punch meant to break bone. Not one had drawn blood. They hadn't needed to. Every move was designed to disable, not destroy. To end the threat without creating a martyr. Ambassador Porter walked slowly to the center of the room. Kor, the last one standing, raised his blade with shaking hands. "Don't," Porter said softly. "You've already lost." Kor looked around. His warriors were down. The other delegates stared in stunned silence. Even the station's AI had gone quiet, its usual calm voice replaced by a low alert tone. Then Briggs stepped beside Porter. He didn't look at Kor. He looked past him at the hostages. "Are you all right?" he asked a trembling Selenari envoy. The alien nodded, eyes wide. That small act, checking on others while danger still stood before him, struck deeper than any threat. Kor's blade lowered. His shoulders slumped. He dropped the weapon. I didn't think," he stammered. "You thought we were weak," Lena said, standing now, hands still empty. "That's your mistake." Security teams from the station finally arrived, weapons drawn, but they stopped at the door, confused. The fight was over. No shots fired, no alarms blaring, just 7 Zorvathi on the floor, and 4 humans standing like they'd just finished a walk. News spread fast. Within the hour, every delegation on Viridia Station knew what happened. Within 2 hours, Unity Spire received the full sensor logs. The footage was reviewed by council analysts, military advisors, and security chiefs. They watched it again and again, searching for hidden weapons, energy pulses, anything that explained how unarmed humans had neutralized trained warriors so completely. They found nothing. No tech. No tricks, just training, discipline, and something harder to measure, control. Back on the station, the human guards helped the medics tend to the Zorvathi. They offered water to the shaken hostages. They spoke quietly, calmly, never raising their voices. When a young page asked Marcus how they did it, he simply said, "We practiced not fighting. Until we had to." The Zorvathi radicals were taken into custody. Their demands were ignored. But the real fallout wasn't political, it was psychological. For the first time, other species looked at human guards not with pity, but with unease. If these people could do that without weapons, what could they do with them? Or worse, what did it mean that they chose not to? On the shuttle back to Unity Spire, Ambassador Porter sat quietly, staring out the window. Briggs stood near the door, arms crossed, eyes half closed but alert. "You think they'll understand now?" Porter asked. Briggs didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Understanding takes time. Fear is faster." Porter nodded. "Good, let them be afraid. Not of our weapons, but of our choice not to use them." The shuttle hummed through the dark, and far behind them, on Viridia Station, delegates whispered in corners, glancing at their own armed guards with new doubt, because now they knew, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who carries nothing at all. Part 3. The silence in the High Council chamber was heavier than usual. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of confusion. Delegates sat in their curved seats, eyes fixed on the central platform where Ambassador Daniel Porter stood alone. Behind him, Kyle Briggs, Lena Cruz, Marcus Boyd, and Theo Grant waited near the human delegations section, hands at their sides, faces calm. They had not been asked to speak. But everyone was watching them anyway. The Viridia Station incident had shaken the council more than anyone admitted. Footage of the unarmed humans disabling 7 armed Zorvathi warriors in seconds had been played in private briefings across Unity Spire. Some called it a fluke, others called it a threat. No one called it normal. High Arbiter and Lara of the Selenari Concord, a tall being with smooth gray skin and eyes like polished stone, finally broke the silence. "Earth delegation," she said, her voice low and measured. "You claim your guards carry no weapons as a sign of peace. Yet what happened on Viridia Station looked very much like war." Porter nodded. "It was defense, Arbiter, not war." "There is a difference." "A difference of words," snapped Counselor Vex from the Qatari section. "Your people moved like predators. They struck like soldiers. If that is peace, then I would hate to see your version of war." Murmurs rose from several delegations. The Mirkal envoy clicked its mandibles in agreement. Even the usually neutral Velnari leaned forward, antennae twitching with interest. Porter turned slightly, glancing back at Briggs. Then he faced the council again. "We understand your concern, and we're willing to show you the truth. Not with words, with demonstration." A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Demonstrations were rare, dangerous, usually reserved for new weapons or defense systems. "What do you propose?" And Lara asked. "Let our guards face your best," Porter said. "Not in battle. In a controlled setting. No weapons on either side. Just skill against skill. Let the council see what we truly are." Vex laughed, a dry, hissing sound. "You want our elite warriors to fight barehanded against your clerks? This is a joke." "They are not clerks," Lena Cruz said suddenly. Her voice was quiet but clear, cutting through the room without effort. Every head turned. She hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice, but she had spoken, and that was enough to silence Vex. And Lara studied the humans for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well. A demonstration will be held tomorrow in Training Bay 7. Each of the 3 major military delegations, the Qatari, the Zorvathi, and the Selenari, will send 2 of their finest unarmed combatants. Your 4 guards will face them. Non-lethal rules only. Neural inhibitors active. No permanent harm allowed." Porter bowed slightly. "Agreed." The next day, Training Bay 7 was packed. Delegates filled the observation galleries, some standing in the back. Cameras hovered near the ceiling, feeding live images to private screens across the station. The floor was a wide circle of impact-absorbing material, marked with glowing lines. At one side stood the human guards in their plain black uniforms. At the other, 6 warriors, 2 Qatari with scaled arms and sharp claws, 2 Zorvathi with thick necks and heavy builds, and 2 Selenari with long limbs and precise stances. No one wore armor. No one carried tools. Just bodies, training, and intent. High Arbiter and Lara stood at the edge. "The rules are simple. Subdue your opponent. Render them unable to continue. First team to win 3 matches wins the demonstration." The first match began with Marcus Boyd facing a Qatari warrior named Rel. Rel was taller, heavier, and moved with the confidence of someone who had won dozens of duels. He circled Marcus, claws flexing. Marcus didn't circle. He stood still. Rel lunged, fast, but Marcus shifted just enough. Rel's claws passed through empty air. Before he could recover, Marcus stepped in, hooked an arm under Rel's shoulder, and used the alien's own momentum to flip him onto his back. The impact knocked the wind out of Rel. He tried to rise, but Marcus placed a hand lightly on his chest, enough pressure to say, "Stay down," and stepped back. The match was over in 8 seconds. Gasps filled the gallery. Next, Theo Grant faced a Zorvathi named Gorv. Gorv charged like a bull, arms wide to grab and crush. Theo sidestepped, grabbed Gorv's wrist, and twisted. Gorv roared, trying to pull free, but Theo guided him into a spin that ended with the Zorvathi flat on his stomach, arm pinned behind his back. Theo released him the moment Gorv stopped struggling. Second win. Human. The third match was Lena Cruz against a Selenari fighter named Tira. Tira was fast, graceful, using quick jabs and feints. Lena didn't block every strike. She let one land on her shoulder, softly, and used the contact to read Tira's rhythm. On the third feint, Lena caught Tira's wrist, turned, and swept her legs. Tira hit the mat hard, dazed. Lena offered a hand to help her up. Tira took it, eyes wide with respect. 3 wins. No losses. The remaining 3 warriors looked at each other. They had seen enough. They bowed and stepped back. Silence returned, deeper this time. Afterward, in a private debriefing room, Nilara sat across from Porter and Briggs. "You did not just show skill," she said. "You showed something else, control, restraint. You could have hurt them. You chose not to." Briggs spoke for the first time. "Hurting is easy. Stopping before you hurt, that's hard. That's what we train for." "Why?" Nilara asked. "Why go through such length?" "GT has to avoid violence when you are clearly capable of it. Because violence solves the moment," Porter said. "But it poisons the future. On Earth, we learned that the strongest peace is built not on fear of weapons, but on trust in people." Nilara was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Are all your guards like this?" "No," Briggs said. "Only the ones who choose to be. This isn't forced. It's earned. Years of training. Years of saying no to anger, to pride, to the easy choice. Most don't make it. The ones who do, they understand that the real fight isn't with others. It's with yourself." Later that evening, a young Qatari page, the same one who had spoken to Lena on Unity Spire, found her alone in a quiet corridor. He held a small data pad. "My commander asked me to give you this," he said, voice shaky. "It's a formal request. From the Qatari Honor Guard. They want to learn how you do what you do." Lena took the pad. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Tell your commander we don't teach fighters. We teach peacekeepers." The boy nodded, turned, and ran off. In the days that followed, requests poured in. The Velnari wanted observers at human training sessions. The Mirkal asked for translated manuals on human conflict resolution. Even Vex was seen speaking quietly with his security chief, gesturing toward the human quarters. The humans did not boast. They did not demand recognition. They simply continued their duties, standing, watching, ready. But now, when they walked through the halls of Unity Spire, other guards gave them space. Not out of fear, but out of something new. Respect. Because the Council was beginning to understand. The humans didn't carry weapons not because they were weak, but because they had mastered something far harder than fighting. They had mastered the choice not to. Part 4. The request came quietly through official channels, but without fanfare. High Arbiter Nilara asked Ambassador Daniel Porter for a private briefing. Not in the council chamber, not in a meeting room, but in a small shielded archive deep in Unity Spire's lower levels. Only a handful of senior delegates were invited. Vex of the Qatari, the Zorvathi Elder Marak, the Mirkal Envoy, and 2 others. No guards were allowed inside. Not even human ones. Porter arrived alone. He carried a thin data slate. When he entered, the others were already seated around a circular table, their faces unreadable. Nilara gestured to the empty chair. "We wish to understand," she said. "Not just what your guards can do, but why they are this way." Porter placed the slate on the table. "It starts long before we reached the stars," he said. "On Earth, we had thousands of years of war. Kings fought kings. Nations burned cities. We built weapons that could end all life. And then, we stopped." Vex leaned forward. "Stopped? No species stops war unless forced." "We forced ourselves," Porter replied. "Not with laws, not with treaties alone, but with a choice. A hard one. We realized that the real enemy wasn't the other side, it was our own fear. Our own need to strike first." He tapped the slate. The wall screen lit up with old footage, grainy, black and white, silent at first. Men in simple clothes standing before tanks, women linking arms in front of armed soldiers, a single man facing a line of rifles, hands empty. "This is from our past," Porter said. "Before spaceflight, before Unity, these people had nothing but their will. And yet they changed the world." Marak, the Zorvathi elder, frowned. "They look weak, defenseless." "They were," Porter said. "But their weakness became their strength. Because when you have nothing to lose, you gain the power to shame those who do." More footage played. Martial artists moving with calm precision. Peacekeepers stepping between rioters without raising a hand. Soldiers laying down weapons not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. "The training your guards showed on Viridia Station," Nilara said slowly. "It comes from this?" "Yes," Porter said. "But it's more than fighting. It's mindset. Every human guard spends years learning not just how to move, but how to listen. How to see anger before it becomes violence. How to stand so still that others pause and think. He showed more clips. A man in a torn uniform standing between two armed gangs speaking softly until they lowered their guns. A woman walking into a burning building to carry out a child while soldiers watched stunned. "We call it the quiet strength," Porter said. "It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It simply is." Vex was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You expect us to believe your entire species changed? That you gave up violence?" "No," Porter said. "We didn't give it up. We outgrew it. Like a child outgrows a toy. We still have soldiers. We still defend ourselves. But we learned that the strongest defense is not a weapon. It's the certainty that you won't need one." He paused. "Our guards carry no weapons because their presence is the message. Anyone who studies Earth knows this. They know that if a human stands unarmed in a room full of armed beings, it's not because they're helpless. It's because they've already decided the outcome." Marek shifted in his seat. "Then why show us this now?" "Because you're afraid," Porter said gently. "And fear makes smart beings do foolish things. We don't want allies who follow us out of awe. We want partners who understand." The screen changed again. This time it showed Earth today. Cities with green parks, children playing under open skies, ships launching not for war but for exploration. "We are not perfect," Porter admitted. "We still argue. We still make mistakes. But we choose every day to try a different way." Nalara stood. "And your guards? They are the living proof of that choice?" "Yes," Porter said. "They are not warriors. They are reminders. Reminders that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of control." The meeting ended without ceremony. No applause. No grand statements. But as the delegates left, they walked slower. Thought deeper. Later that night, Kyle Briggs stood on an outer observation deck watching a supply ship drift toward the station. Lena joined him, hands in her pockets. "They know now," she said. "Some of them," Briggs replied. "Knowing isn't the same as believing." Back in the Qatari delegation quarters, Vex sat alone in his private chamber. On his desk lay a printed image from the briefing. A photo of a human monk from centuries ago, sitting calmly as soldiers pointed guns at him. Vex traced the edge of the paper with one claw. For the first time, he wondered if strength could be silent. On the Zorvathi ship docked at Unity Spire, Barak ordered his honor guard to review all human historical records. Not just their wars, he told them. Their choices after. Even the Mirkal began adjusting their own protocols. Their guard still carried sonic stingers. But now they trained in stillness, standing for hours without moving, learning to read micro-expressions, practicing breath control. The humans noticed the changes. They said nothing. They didn't need to, because the truth was spreading not through speeches but through quiet observation. Species that once saw unarmed humans as naive now saw them as deliberate. Every time a human guard stood calmly while others reached for weapons, it sent a message. We have already won the fight in our minds. You are still in yours. And that was the hardest kind of victory to answer. In the weeks that followed, small things changed across Unity Spire. Arguments in the corridors ended faster. Delegates paused before raising their voices. Security teams began training in de-escalation, not just combat. The humans didn't lead this change. They simply lived it. And slowly the galaxy began to watch, not with suspicion but with curiosity. With the first fragile seeds of understanding because now they knew. The reason human diplomatic guards carried no weapons wasn't weakness. It was the quiet echo of a species that had stared into the abyss of endless war and walked away. Part 5. Unity Spire changed slowly, like a river shifting its course over stone. No grand announcement marked the shift. No new laws were passed. But in the halls where diplomats once marched with armed escorts, something quieter began to grow. Delegates still carried guards, yes, but now some of those guards stood with empty hands. The Velnari were first. They replaced 2 of their plasma-wielding sentinels with unarmed observers trained in human-style stillness. The Myrkal followed, adding unarmed attendants who moved with deliberate calm during tense negotiations. Even the proud Qatari, after months of private study, stationed 1 unarmed honor guard beside their armed ones during council sessions. A silent nod to a new idea. The humans did not claim credit. They never had. Ambassador Daniel Porter continued his work as before, speaking softly, listening carefully, always flanked by Kyle Briggs, Lena Cruz, Marcus Boyd, and Theo Grant. They still carried no weapons. They still stood without armor. But now when they entered a room, the air changed. Not because of fear, but because of respect. The real test came 3 cycles later, during a dispute over water rights in the Drine system. The Zorvathi and the Selenari both claimed the same ice-rich moon. Old tensions flared, voices rose. A Zorvathi delegate slammed his fist on the table and his guard's hand went to his sidearm. Across the room, a Selenari warrior tensed, ready to draw, then the door opened. Kyle Briggs walked in alone. He hadn't been summoned. He simply appeared as if drawn by the rising heat of conflict. He stopped just inside the chamber, hands at his sides, eyes calm. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The Zorvathi guard froze, the Selenari warrior slow. Guy lowered his hand. The shouting stopped. Even the air seemed to still. Briggs waited a moment, then gave a small nod, not to anyone in particular, just a gesture of acknowledgement, and turned to leave. As he did, the Zorvathi delegate let out a long breath. "Perhaps," he said, voice quieter now, "we should speak again tomorrow, with cooler heads." No one argued. That moment became legend in the lower corridors of Unity Spire, not because of violence, but because of its absence, because one unarmed man had done what a dozen armed guards could not. He had reminded everyone why they were there in the first place. The Galactic Council never issued a formal statement about human guards. They didn't need to. The lesson had been learned in actions, not words. Species that once mocked Earth's naive security now studied it. Training requests poured in, not for weapons, but for discipline, for control, for the art of standing so firmly in peace that war dares not approach. Briggs and his team began teaching, not in grand arenas, but in small rooms with padded floors and soft lights. Students came from a dozen worlds, Qatari with their sharp claws, Selenari with their long limbs, even a few young Zorvathi still wrestling with their warrior pride. They learned to breathe before reacting, to read a face before raising a hand, to move not to hurt but to protect. Lena Cruz often told her students the goal is not to win the fight. It's to make sure the fight never starts. Marcus Boyd taught balance not just of the body but of the mind. Anger is heavy, he'd say. If you carry it, you fall. Theo Grant worked with the youngest recruits, showing them how to use words as shields. A question can stop a blade faster than a block, he'd say with a small smile. And Kyle Briggs? He rarely spoke in class. He simply stood, moved, demonstrated. His presence was the lesson. Back on Earth, news of the change spread. Not with pride, but with quiet hope. Schools added new courses on nonviolent resolution. Old martial arts dojos updated their teachings to include modern ethics. Children learned that true strength wasn't in how hard you could hit, but in how well you could hold back. On Unity Spire, Ambassador Porter prepared to return home. His term was ending. A new envoy would take his place, but the guards would stay. Briggs had been asked to remain as head instructor for the new Peacekeeper Initiative, a quiet program born from the Council's unspoken agreement that maybe, just maybe, humanity had something worth learning. The night before Porter left, he stood with Briggs on the same observation deck where they'd watched stars for years. Below them, the station hummed with life. Delegates walking side by side, guards standing watch without touching their weapons, voices low and calm. "They finally get it," Porter said. "Some do," Briggs replied. "Others are still learning." "That's enough," Porter said. "It's always been enough." The next morning, as Porter's shuttle lifted from the docking bay, Briggs stood on the platform with Lena, Marcus, and Theo. No fanfare, no speeches, just a nod between old friends. Inside the council chamber that same day, a minor trade dispute arose between the Velnari and the Mirkal. Tensions rose. Hands twitched. Then from the human section, Lena Cruz stood and walked slowly to the center. She didn't speak. She just stood there, calm, present. The arguing stopped. Later, a young Qatari page asked her why she did it. "Because someone has to remind them," she said, "that peace isn't fragile. It's strong, stronger than any weapon." And so it continued, not with explosions or declarations, but with silence, with stillness, with the simple, powerful act of choosing not to fight. In the echoing halls of Unity Spire, When voices grew loud and tempers flared, all it took was the quiet arrival of an unarmed human to bring calm to the room. Because now, everyone knew. They didn't carry weapons not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't, and that made all the difference.